Hello everyone. So the Wanderer has been out, and a common thing I've heard from players about him is that they can't use him to clear the Abyss, or that he's just not very strong. I heard this when he first came out, and even now, if you look into my Should You Pull the Wanderer video, you'll see some comments mentioning this very thing. So to help all of you struggling with him, as well as for all of you new Wanderer players, I'm gonna share some of the best teams you can play him in. These teams will be hypercarry teams and reaction teams. All of them are strong and thus will increase your combat strength. It should help you to defeat that enemy you weren't able to before, and possibly help you get all 9 stars in floor 12. Without further ado, let's talk about these teams, beginning with Hypercarry Wanderer. The Wanderer is a character that can benefit from all kinds of buffs. You can throw at him animal damage bonus, attack, and normal attack damage. You name it, he'll probably benefit from it. As such, you can buff him so much to where his damage is very high, and high enough to carry the entire damage of his team, hence Hypercarry Wanderer. This team trades the usual Genshin team traits of variability and reactions for high, simple damage. I especially recommend this team for those of you that like playing the Wanderer. With this team, you'll have lots of fun. The rotation of this team is really simple. It starts off with Zhongli's skill. Immediately after is Farazan's skill, then her burst. And then use Benny's skill and burst. After this, if the Wanderer has for Pavilion, use his charged attack to activate the artifact's buff, then use his skill and repeat the attack pattern of 2 normal attacks mixed in with a charged attack. This pattern deals the most damage than just using normal attacks or just charge attacking. Lastly, if you have the Wanderer's burst, use it near or at the end of his skill. When it comes to the builds of the characters used, everyone aside from the Wanderer is built as a support, so they are in their usual builds. Zhongli is using for tenacity, however with the Favoni's lance to battery the Wanderer. This makes a big difference, but if you want someone else to help out with the team's damage, you could build Zhongli in a burst and shield hybrid build. Also, since Benny will be using Noblesse, there's very little reason to also give Farazan Noblesse. It's instead better to give her sets that will increase her own damage, or a set that will improve her own or the team's energy, such as 4 Exile or 2 Emblem. An honorable mention of this type of team is a variation that includes Venti. Playing Venti in this team, honestly it feels like cheating. Fighting enemies becomes very easy, it's pretty broken. Venti will group all enemies tightly together so that your attacks extend to all enemies. This increases your DPS significantly. Venti also has the plus of acting as a good battery to the Wanderer, so playing him will solve a good amount of the Wanderer's energy problems. Now let's delve into an underrated reaction team of the Wanderers, Melt Wanderer. This Melt team is a little different from normal Melt teams since it's actually reverse Melt, but it's strong all the same. It also has the bonus of playing Hat Guy and Nahida together for all of you lore connoisseurs. In this team, Thoma gets a lot of love since not only can you dust him off and play him, he's actually the backbone of this team. He acts as the shielder to the Wanderer, which is incredibly important and pretty much needed to play the Wanderer. Plus he acts as the pyro enabler of the team, with which Nahida combined allows for constant pyro application that Rosaria can use to melt. That's how the team works, but let's talk about how its specific rotations work. First, use Nahida's skill and directly after her burst. Do the same now for Thoma. This will inflict burning on enemies. Next, cast Rosaria's skill for a quick hit of melt, and then cast her burst for repeated melts. Once that's done, switch to the Wanderer, use his skill and normal attack. After his skill is done, activate his burst. Alright, with that covered, I'll quickly go over the build portion of this team. First, Thoma should be built as a shield support, wielding for Noblesse and the Favoni's lance. This is to battery himself as well as the Wanderer and Rosaria. Speaking of Rosaria, be sure to build high crit on her, since she will be dealing a good portion of the team's total damage, so build her as you would any DPS, but with good energy recharge, at around 150. Now let's switch gears from Melt and talk about Freeze Wanderer. The Wanderer fits really well into Freeze teams, not only because he's Anemo, but because the playstyle of Freeze actually caters to him. With Freeze, you don't have to worry about being attacked or dealing with the Wanderer's knockbacks, since of course enemies will be frozen. So you don't need a shielder, you don't have to waste time dodging or worrying about defense, rather your main focus is offense and dealing as much damage as possible to enemies. This makes playing the Wanderer more enjoyable and deadly. High damage and freeze is achieved by pairing the Wanderer with multiple damage dealers, for example double Hydro with Rosaria. This team is solely focused on damage, of which you can deal deal a ton. However, if you want to be more safe, you can replace one of the Hydros with Layla or Diona. I'd lean more to Layla since she applies a good amount of cryo, which makes it easier to gain the extra crit from his one favorite state. Layla is also able to make use of her tenacity to buff the Wanderer and strengthen her own shield. In addition to this, you could add one of the Wanderer's support into the team to strengthen his personal damage, for example Yunjin. However, I found the best results by playing the first team I mentioned and by buffing other characters' damage instead of his. I'll get into how I did this later, but I'll first explain the team's rotation, of which is pretty simple. The rotation is mostly just using skills and bursts. Begin with Yelan's, Xingqiu's, and Rosaria's. Finally, just like the last rotation, use the Wanderer's skill, attack with him, and then use his burst after his skill. Onto the team's builds. As I mentioned, this team performed the best when the Wanderer's damage was not increased, rather his teammates' damage was, and this was done through the Wanderer using 4 Viridescent. Normally, I don't recommend the Wanderer using this set since he is a DPS, and as such it's best to buff his damage since of course that's his entire purpose, but in teams where there's multiple sub DPSs like in this team that can benefit from 4 Viridescent, the resistance shred it brings deals more damage than the Wanderer having better personal damage. So it's best if you play him in this set. Now I'm gonna go over a popular team for many characters that works quite well for the Wanderer. It is a Taser Wanderer. This is a really good team to play him in that really has no flaws and that you can't go wrong with. It's a simple, cheap, yet effective team to play him in. With the reaction of Taser, all enemies on the field will take damage, so it's really effective against swarms of enemies. This fits well with the Wanderer, since the main source of his damage, his normal attacks, have a small AoE, so you're not dealing damage to all enemies, yet this team solves this. Taser also benefits the Wanderer by allowing him to easily trigger the Electro and Hydro buffs of his one favorite state. This will increase the time he's able to spend in his skill and increase the energy he gains, so playing him in Taser gives him some nice, useful benefits. Specifically for this team comp, by combining Beidou and Xingqiu, the Wanderer gains tons of interruption resistance. This makes playing him feel great since you're unable to be knocked back, while having the benefit of your shield actually dealing damage, unlike other shields that either just protect you or that deal very minimal damage. Finally, Taser teams also benefit from the Wanderer. The benefits are now going the opposite way because of 4 Viridescent. Like the last team with so many off-field damage dealers, 4 Viridescent becomes a really good choice that the Wanderer can make great use of. Again, though this set sacrifices his damage, it greatly buffs everyone else's damage, and so much so that it's the best in slot for these type of teams. To play this team, start by using Beidou's skill followed by her burst. Next, cast Oz with Fischl's burst or skill. Switch to Xingqiu, use his skill and burst. Lastly, you know the drill, use the Wanderer's skill and attack enemies. Once that's over, activate his burst. Well everyone, that is all the teams I have for you today. I hope you all try these teams out, and hopefully it increases the success you find with the Wanderer. I know it can be very frustrating to pull a character you like, but they're so weak that you can't even play them. It defeats the purpose of actually pulling them and makes you regret even getting them. But with these teams, it should help with this problem and allow you to use him against the Abyss or more difficult enemies. If the teams do help you in this way, please let me know, and please share in the comments any strong teams you currently play the Wanderer in. Anyhow, thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please consider liking and subscribing. Take care everyone, and thank you all once again.